What's up? I'm back with something new, something different, but I think this is it. And I know I might have said that before at other times, but in any event, it's been a real journey for me. Let me preamble a little bit. Let me set the stage for like what this is. I started a podcast called the Shadow Band Podcast back in like 2020, maybe 2019. And that was like just a fun thing for me and a buddy and my wife to kind of just, get through COVID with and just have kind of some fun and explore some different ideas. I've always been, now I got the burps the second I start. I've always been like an explorer of ideas and just like thinking about different things. And what about that? Just having fun. So that was the thing that we did. And at that same time, I was also doing my own podcast a little bit, where I just like, we're trying to be goofy and be funny or something. I don't know. And it just was like pointless. It was a waste of my time, it felt like. And then I had some other ideas that I was working on. I wanted to do like a Bible study thing, but I'm just a regular guy. I'm not like a Bible teacher. And so it was like, I don't know, I had some like imposter syndrome kind of deal doing it. I'm like, who am I to sit here doing some Bible study thing? I'm not a teacher. I grew up with a heavy biblical education. I know my stuff, but I don't know. It didn't quite, I don't know. It felt kind of weird to do it. Then some time went on and I started like a game thing and I was like, I don't know about this either. Again, it was just like, I've got time to do something and I have like this very biblical upbringing and this above the normal understanding and ability to articulate biblical things, I guess. And it just doesn't feel right to not put that out there. My wife's dad, her adopted father, he was like a musician. And when he passed, the kids, had his music. And that inspired them, the cousins and the kids of the family, to get into music. And, that shaped a lot of their lives. And I wanted to also do the same thing. One of the things that I want from my dad when he passes is his Bible. He's got like arcane written notes in like the margins of like every page. I want all of his notes. Which, I probably know everything that he wrote because he's just downloaded all that into my head over, my lifetime. But I don't know. At some point, I was just like, man, I want to do this, but I don't know how to do it in like a creative way for me, like to scratch that itch for me because I like the creative element of it. So eventually, I've just come across so many things that I see proliferating on the internet and in different groups and stuff. And it's just like, wow, I want to just put out better thoughts and correct thoughts on these things. But I don't know how to do it in a way that like is entertaining to me, or that's stimulating to me. I don't want to just sit down and put a thing out and it be like just straightforward. I want to have some kind of fun angle to it. But I don't know. That was over the last few weeks ish, I kind of just really dawned on me like, bro, that's very selfish and it's not about you. So I'm just doing it. I want to be outdoors, but I'm not. It's late at night. I just had a kid. And so she's sleeping right over there, letting the wife get some sleep, and just doing this thing here. And basically, my thesis for this channel and my other channel, or like the sub channel of this, of Story Time with Uncle Charlie, is regular people like myself. I have a regular job. I was homeschooled, but I didn't have any like college studies on this. Just a regular guy who doesn't read his Bible as much as he should, but has read it and goes to church, but not as often as I should. and tries to live the best life in line with what Christ would want. Regular guy can have an understanding of the Bible that is more than just a real surface level, super easy to manipulate, super easy to get off track, super wishy-washy, can't answer a question, doesn't know where any ideas came from, has no idea how to combat another idea or how to, correct a wrong idea that they encounter. I don't have that issue as much. I do in certain things, but they tend to be more advanced. But I think that the regular walking around person can do this. And Mike Rowe was a big inspiration on this. I remember him saying, like, why can't the plumber quote Socrates or Plato or whatever? And I was like, oh yeah, regular people can. This is not just reserved for the seminary graduates. We see what kind of havoc they're wreaking in the West, especially. Anyway, that's the whole idea. Story time. We're just going to read together. I was going to make it like a whole study thing or, try to tell the story in like a cool, funny, witty way. No, not that. We're just going to read like regular people. We're going to read and we're going to get a quick breakdown on it and move on. And hanging out with Uncle Charlie is just going to be us hanging out and talking about stuff that I found. And that's it. Just talk about stuff that I found during the week or things that I've been thinking about. So, and like I said, I'm a regular guy. So what I'm thinking is probably what some of you are thinking. So we're just going to have some regular thoughts and biblical thoughts about different things going on. And I'm not saying that I'm right, but I defer to the word. So anyway, I have a couple of clips that I pulled from a recent podcast with George Janko and Pete Holmes, a.k.a. the Best Batman. I know people don't put him in the running for Best Batmans. They go Christian Bale or the other guy. And I say Pete Holmes, probably Best Batman. So big fan of his. He's made me laugh many times in the earlier 2000s. I think he was on like College Humor and stuff. I don't know. He's a pretty funny guy. But they did a podcast that I didn't watch. Just don't have time. Like I said, this came out like 10, 11 days ago or something like that at this point, and I've been tending to an infant. So didn't have time, but I saw some clips and I was like, whoa, this needs some words on it. Because this is like a real case study into being off in one spot and how far off that can get you in all of the other spots. So, without further ado, let's take a look at one clip here I pulled. Shout out to the George Janko podcast here. Let's take a listen here and make sure my audio is all good on this.
Do you know why Jesus was crucified?
In which way are you asking now?
The biblical way. From like the King James Bible, like when you read the gospel. Do you know why he was even sacrificed?
Well, even the word sacrifice, see, this is where this might be where we diverge.
Yeah, absolutely.
The idea of a sacrifice, this is a framing of something that happened. I believe that Jesus died on the cross to say, I am with you. Look, I know who I am, and I can even face death unafraid.
Yeah.
And he was saying, I'm also involved in your suffering. Jesus on the cross is the big me too. I'm with you. When you're suffering, I'm suffering with you. I'm not on a cloud. I'm here in the dirt and the mud and I'm bleeding and my mother is crying. I'm in this with you. To quote Richard Rohr, Jesus didn't die. This is my theology. Jesus didn't die to change God's mind about us. Like that was our idea. We'll kill a lamb because God hates us. We'll kill something we love to change his mind. That's what we superimposed on the story of Jesus. I don't think that's what happened. I think that's what got added to the story. And that's why I keep the gospel to what Jesus said, not to how it was interpreted after the fact.
Okay. There's a lot there, but there's not that much there. So this is, I don't think, a novel idea. This is something that I think people have thrown out there a lot. That whole like, I'm in the dirt, I'm in the mud, I'm in the thing. That just smacks of this new age Christianity where a pastor will never open the Bible or just take one little tiny verse and like put a whole thing that really doesn't have that much to do with that verse again thing. I've been to many a church service where stuff like this is said, where everything is to like try to humanize Jesus as much as possible, which is fine. He was human. But at the same time, like you can't look, some ideas you can't just take off and run with. Right? It's not and or I don't know what the phrase is, but it's not either or. It's and. That is true, what he said. However, it's ironic that he says he keeps the Bible, or keeps his belief about Jesus to the Gospels and what Jesus said. And then says that he was not sacrificed for us. When Jesus says 2 verses before John 3:16 and John 3:14, and I will read it. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Right? This is just 2 verses before John 3:16. We go back just a hop skip, and we get Jesus himself saying why he's being crucified, him giving the reason. And the story that he references is a very specific story, because the lifting up is multi-level symbolism. There was many a lifting up, but he chose this story. The people had sinned, and a snake was brought into the camp and bit them all. The snake is sin. It had stung them all, bit them all, and they were dying from that. And so with all of them being sick, Moses then took a golden snake, serpent, and he lifted it up on a stick. And anybody that came to the snake and knelt and looked upon the snake was healed. Now, there's many a lifting up stories. Moses lifted his staff before the Red Sea. There's that priest or a prophet that lifted his arms up and the earth stood still while the Israelites battled whomever. There's plenty of lifting up stories, but Jesus himself referenced this one. So if you're going to limit your understanding of Christ and his life to what he specifically said in the Gospels, this would be one of those things. So the story he's referencing is a sacrifice to heal, to save from death, which is what the animal sacrifices were also symbolic of. This was not superimposed on after. This was done as a commandment from God. He commanded the sacrifices. God said, you will do this, looking forward to the sacrifice that would come. This is Abraham and Isaac. This is the serpent. This is Cain and Abel. This is what Jesus is talking about. Jesus in the gospel. So you can't, I don't know. You can't, I don't know how you reconcile the two. Especially right after saying that thing, that you don't believe the sacrifice is what the sacrifice is, and then say, I only go based off of what Jesus said in the Gospels, and then Jesus did say that in the Gospels right before the most popular verse in the Gospels, I don't know how you get there from here kind of deal, right? That dog just won't hunt. Now, there is a level to this, right? Being off on this, and the sacrifice was just like to boost your morale or to make him seem relatable, then lowers the significance of the event, right? If somebody does something for you and it's just to boost like how you feel and to make them more personable, then like that's cool. But it doesn't really, like, it doesn't matter that much. It's unfortunate what happened to them, and it's significant in that fact as like a historical event. Like, wow, this thing happened, and that's meaningful to me. But that's about the extent of what that could be. If somebody traded their life for yours, they say, I'm going to take his penalty. You did something, and I'm going to take the penalty of it for you. I have dibs on your life now. And now you see where the rub becomes and why people gravitate toward this kind of thinking of lowering the significance of the event, right? Peter, who was with Jesus at the time, right? And Paul, they like were together and learning and teaching each other. They had mentioned this, I believe, in a letter to the Corinthians. They wrote, you were bought, purchased at a price, right? If somebody, with this event, right, with Christ dying, because he died for you, he now owns you. You're a slave to him, and that's okay because he's a good master, right? That's the that's the picture. We're in subject to him, subjugation to him. We are his little minions. We are his little slaves. But he's a good master. He's not this, I got it, it's my way, and I'm going to punish you the second you do something wrong. That's not the case. He's very forgiving. He's very merciful. His patience knows almost no end. You can't run his patience out. It runs out when he feels like it. You can't change his mind. Only he can. You know what I mean? So this lowering the significance of the event, now I don't have to remember that. It's not that important. I don't owe him anything. He's just a great guy, and he was powerful, and he was the king of the universe, but he's not done. He doesn't own me. He doesn't have any right to me. Let's take a look at another clip. Let's take a look at another clip here. Because this, I think, kind of jumps into the next one. The same podcast. There's another clip.
I'd like to just learn a little bit more from your perspective before we dive too much into theology, because I don't want it to be a debate. I just want to more learn from your perspective of life.
No, I'm enjoying this, yeah.
Pardon me if I poke too much, but I just from my learning, it was the divorce that really spun you into a direction where you're like...
Yeah, look at you, George. That's good research, too. My biggest stumbling block, I guess you could say, was first the health thing. But then, as you mentioned, my wife and I were both believers, and we got married when I was 22, and she was 24. And then she ended up having an affair and leaving me, which, sounds easy to scapegoat her. That's not what I'm doing. What came to the front for me at that moment was I thought I had a deal with God that I didn't smoke, I didn't drink.
Okay. He's going to postulate this idea out here, and he's going to say that this is not what he believes. or he doesn't believe what the Bible says. But notice where he still lands, though.
I didn't swear. I witnessed to people. I believed in the Bible. I read. I prayed. I did everything correct. And then I felt like he had sort of left me twisting in the wind. I don't think that's correct. Even if you read the Bible, I don't think that's what it's saying. But that was my interpretation.
It's a fair interpretation, though.
I think a lot of people share it. You read it in the Bible, people are representing that. It's very tribal. It's like he's with us, and he hates who we hate, and he loves us, and we will win, and we will squash the others.
I disagree with that part.
I'm talking about the Old Testament, the priests of Baal and the priests of Yahweh.
They poorly represented God. That's why Jesus came and corrected the law. It's what
We're going to jump back to that one because that's, I don't know.
I believe too. And it was like a very wrong mindset. But I could see why you would be frustrated when you weigh your works out and you're like, this doesn't make sense. This guy's a piece of shit. And he cheats on his wife, but his wife is so good to him and loves him. And yet I'm here and I serve you and I go and I preach the gospel and I want to be with the youth. And I never even looked at another woman, let alone flirted with her, let alone cheated. And yet you gave me a bride that broke me. So yeah, I understand why you would shake your fist at the Lord.
What happened was I married a woman.
Okay. Now, situation, it's awful. It sucks. And I know I have the same kind of circumstances, but of my own doing, my own unfaithfulness. So I know this story. This is very near and dear. However, again, this is where a little off can take you way off. And it's so, again, he references something that is like the reference you pulled explains what it is that you're like, it is counter to what you're even referencing. Let me explain what's going on here. So again, he's claiming that he read the Bible and he did and all that, and he understands that this is a wrong way of thinking, but this is how he thinks, and I understand that. I was there. Jesus, again, when he is speaking to the people about the house built on the sand versus the house built on the rock, he says that there's a house that was built on the sand, and the winds and the rain beat against the house, and the house fell. And then there was a house that was built on the stone, on the rock, and the wind and the rain came and the storms came and beat against that house, and that house stood. You are not buying, and he says this, a protection plan. Serving God does not exempt you from suffering. It does not. Jesus said himself, the wind and the rain and the storms of life hit both houses. Both houses get smashed. One stands, one doesn't. And this is talking about faith. Faith in the trueness of who Christ is and what he has done and what he's going to do, versus faith in some like loose, shaky, sandy idea of a thing. And you can see that, you can get a feel for he's in the loose, shaky, and that breaks my heart. Especially because I've been through this in my own marriage. I was the one that perpetrated the offenses. So I know it from the other end. And I can't imagine going through that with no hope, with no rock, with a weak. My heart breaks on this one. But again, I struggle with understanding, like, you're saying that you get, and this is why it's important, because you can get off. And I know I'm like jumping all over my own thoughts here, but a little bit off will take you a lot of it off. And it does change your life. It does change where you end up down the road. It does change how you deal with things. The idea that you have some sort of agreement or that you're exempt from something, it's like it's not found anywhere in the Bible. What he references, Israel, God is with us and those are the bad guys, and that was God's relationship to a nation, a people group. It's different than the individual. And he references the prophets of Baal. And I don't know specifically, maybe he's referencing some other story, but there is a specific one with the prophets of Baal when they are going up against Elijah about whose God is real and whatever, and they're sitting there cutting their chests and bleeding everywhere and doing their hooting and hollering, trying to call down fire onto their altar, and they can't do it, and they exhaust themselves, and they're all sitting around their altar, and then Elijah comes up and pours water all over his altar, prays, God rains down fire on his altar and the other altar, burns everybody up, cooks them. Elijah's life, he's got that kind of relationship with God, lives his life in fear constantly of Jezebel. I believe that was the queen at the time. Constantly in fear that she's going to kill him. Look at the life of David. David, the man after God's own heart. Jesus is called the son of David. Like the highest honor probably of anybody in the Bible. He's not called the son of Mary. He's called the son of David. He, best friend killed, cannot be with his family because Saul the king is constantly trying to kill him. He's got a wife and kids, cannot be with them. He's a nomad. Almost through his whole entire young manhood, his prime years, he spent on the run, and he's got one confidant, one man who is constantly on his side and helping protect him and manage his affairs while he's gone and all that. Jonathan, his best friend, Saul's son. Saul sins. Jonathan has to die now as well. David knows. And what's crazy is he did nothing. This is before David did any of the bad stuff. This is his life prior to doing the bad stuff. This is him on top of his game, just doing what the Lord wants constantly. That's his life. A nomad who cannot be with his family, loses his best friend, is constantly being hunted, cannot even kill the man who's trying to kill him. He easily could, but does not, and puts himself into just being hunted for more and more years. That's his life. Look at the life of Job. Job is like a one-off kind of situation. It's like the extreme of all of them. But because of his righteousness, his whole family was killed except for his wife, who then nagged him to curse God. There's no bargaining agreement. There's no, I'm going to serve you so you serve me. There's no quid pro quo with God. Look at Abel. He gave God what he wanted and was murdered. The same rain, the same storm, the same winds will beat against both houses. Those who have faith in Christ and those who do not will experience the same storms of life. Other people doing terrible things to us. Companies, countries, circumstances, economics, the universe, whatever you call it, doing difficult things to us. Where serving Christ comes into play, where there's some sort of a bargaining thing, is you spare extra of heaping on yourself the weight of your own sins. That's where the service comes in. That's where following Christ is it's a light yoke. I don't have to worry about, I was homeschooled. I only had one girlfriend before I married my wife. I don't have a bunch of other baggage. My wife was the first person I ever, slept with. It's that I don't have a bunch of other baggage. I didn't party. Much like his life, I lived squeaky. I was spared my own burdens of my own actions because of the way that I lived and tried to serve the Lord as best I could. Wasn't perfect, but I tried. And so I was spared a lot of my own extra stuff, but I still had financial issues. I still lost my job with an infant twice. You know, my apartment was leaking. I had my children sleeping in a dining room. Like, I had to borrow money from church to pay bills, and you know, I lost my job. I've lost every job I've had, just about. You know, the suffering, and then unfaithful on top of that, and all the burden of that on my marriage. So much weight that life will just hit you with. The storms are heavy. They hit you hard. But they hit everybody hard. Just because I serve the Lord and have faith in him does not mean that I'm exempt from the suffering. Suffer. My conscience suffers when I sin. Suffering is, everybody gets it. But the difference is when the storm is over, whose house is still standing. And that's where, yeah, it's tough for me to, in particular, because I'm that story is so akin to my own sort of experience, a little different, but still very akin to that experience. Like, that's very sad that the house didn't stand. And then again, it's like, I don't know if he even sees it. You know, and it's what's mind blowing. It's like, off of the heels of, I stick to the Gospels, and it's like, these are Jesus's words. This is Jesus's words. There's no bargaining. Jesus says this, and I know he said that. That's not correct, but it's like, bro, your house didn't stand, and you have to see that, right? I don't know. It's very unfortunate, but I don't think that this is, like I said, I don't think this is a novel idea. I don't think that he's alone in his thinking. So, you know, for anybody else out there who's got, you know, similar situations or feeling a certain way about your own suffering, listen, your relationship with God does not exempt you from the fiery arrows of life. Satan can, you know, there's some limits with what his direct interactions with you can be. But life, evil people, it's just not necessarily evil people. Some people, it just, look, we all got that sin in us, and it prevails sometimes. You know, even good Christian people, they fall away, they stumble, and it can really hurt you. And your relationship with God, it should only get stronger. You can have moments of falling away. You can have moments of doubt. You can have moments of look, read the Psalms. Read the Psalms. That's what, again, I don't know how you land here. Read the Psalms. David is in anguish constantly. But then he reassures himself. Lo, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Like, that's where he is. I'm in the shadow of death. My enemies surround me constantly. They seek my life. David's children were trying to kill him. Man after God's own heart. That's what he gets. But his faith, the relationship persists. There should be one anchor in your life, and that is your anchor to Christ. That everything else can fall apart. I'm telling you from experience. I've been there where everything has fallen apart. I have no financial basis. I have no marital basis. I'm at odds with everybody in my life. I'm overwhelmed with everything. Nothing is going correct. 0 things are going correct. The only thing I have is Christ. The only thing I have. The only thing that gets me through is Christ. That's it. I'll finish out my own story with it because this is hanging out. So you're going to hear some stories. And then we'll jump into the last clip. And then I got some other interesting things that might be kind of cool to talk about. Anyway, so off the heels of being unfaithful, my whole life unraveled. I was a personal trainer. I lost all of my clientele, just about. The rules at the gym changed, so I was not making the money that I was making. I wasn't having, the revenue that I was making at the time, which wasn't great, but it was enough. So finances completely fell apart. I had an infant at home that was inconsolable 24/7, just hated everything. I could not figure him out at all. There was no like real bond there that sometimes you want to, there's some little magic that sometimes dad has, but no, it was not there. It was just drool and crying and screaming constantly. And my apartment started leaking. And so in multiple places, and the people just wouldn't fix it, couldn't fix it. So my children, my infant and my toddler were sleeping in my dining room. I barely have any work. I've got this deep, dark, terrible secret that nobody knows about except me. And I, when it happened, like literally like 45 minutes after it happened, I called up a church, didn't even go to that church, just called up a church and was like, I got to talk to a pastor. I can't believe what I just did. And, confessed everything to the pastor, prayer, all that. But wife didn't know. And nobody knew. I told my parents too. Cause I couldn't believe what I just had. I couldn't believe what just happened. And then subsequent right after that, my whole, so I did a bad thing and then I immediately confessed it and was like, I'm done. I got it. That's it. And my whole life began to fall apart after that. Everything, dude. There was not a facet of it that was not unraveling so quickly. Until a few months later, I confessed. I would have never gotten caught. But I knew I had to do it. And the pastor told me I had to do it. And he's like, I'm not telling you when, but you have to do it. And sooner rather than later. So sleep on it, but you have to come clean. And I knew I had to. And I had very important people in my life telling me not to come clean. Just don't ever do it again and take it to your grave. But I knew what I had to do, and I did it. My father always told me, if you're man enough to do the wrong thing, you better be man enough to do the right thing. Or at least come clean about it. So I did it. I went and I confessed. I told my wife what happened, and not great. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was not great for a while. But life started to turn around. I started, going back to church. Right before that, started going back to church, reading Bible studies, and things started trending in the other direction where, what felt like supernatural undoing of my life is now relenting a little bit. I was able to get into an apartment that was a little bit nicer than I should have been able to get into and affordable. I got a new job, and I told the guy I had a job that was far away, and I told him I'd take it anyway, and I didn't have a car that can get there, and I went to church with some random guys, and I just prayed with them. I was like, I got a job. I start on Monday. It's Thursday, or I think it's Thursday. I think it was like a Thursday or Friday night, and I started on Monday, and I took a job because I have to, the place that I'm at is not good for me and my marriage. I had to take this other position at this job at this other company, and I don't have a way to get there, but I know that that's what the Lord wants me to do, and I know he's going to make a way, but I don't have a vehicle that can get all the way up to where it is. It's like 45 minutes away, highway. Can't get there with the vehicle I have now. But I took it, and I'm taking it on faith, and so I know something's going to happen. And a day or two later, a guy just showed up at my house with a car. Just showed up at the house with a car. And the only reason I bring this up is because terrible things happen to everybody. Difficult times come through, and there's a house on a rock and there's a house on sand. And the outcome afterward is clear. That's why Jesus says the story the way it does. A house collapses, very evident, very visible, very visceral. A collapsed house. You don't see those all the time. There is an attitude out there of like, my faith can be tested, but not really. Right? Oh, this is a real Job moment or Job season in my life, but it's not. Job's whole entire family was killed except for his wife, and his house was destroyed in like a tornado. And he boils and blisters on him and lost all of his wealth. Like, you're not going through a Job season. Your whole family wasn't killed in a storm. But people, my faith's really being tested, or, they know that their faith will be tested, but like nobody's really comfortable with an actual test of your faith. It's like seeing how strong a table is and putting a 5-pound weight on it. And that's all I'm willing to do because I really don't want the table to break. So this attitude is very prevalent, especially in the West, especially in like America, where it's like, the second something difficult happens, like actually going to test the faith, actually going to put you through the ringer, actually going to see what your faith can sustain. No. Actually going to see what your commitments and your promises and your oaths and your vows can sustain. How much worse for better or for worse, for sickness or health, for rich or poor, how sick, how worse can it get? Let's really see. Do you really mean that? That kind of deal. That's prevalent everywhere, not just in marriage, but in all commitments. Our commitment to our Lord. It's the same thing. One more clip. I don't even know what this one is. I don't remember why I picked this one.
Christ is not Jesus' last name. Christ is a word that means...
He's the Messiah.
It doesn't mean the Messiah either. Christ is a word for the whole thing. Christ consciousness, unitive consciousness, the one. Jesus realized his oneness. I and the Father are one. Again, where you and I might differ is that I think that I is the same I that you are, because what other I is there? I think there's only one I. I think there's only one awareness. There's a great Bird Talker lyric, we're one wind distracted by our different sails. There's one God. Bob Marley, one love. The Jews, God is one. All faith at its deep levels seems to agree or seems to point to it's one. And in my tradition now, non-dual, it won't even say it's one, it just says it's not two. Because calling it one means you're standing apart from it and going, there's one. We're just going to call it not dual, not one. So Christ is a word that means that realization. So when Jesus says, I and the Father are one, I think the call is for you to go and do likewise. It's to recognize who your Father is and go home.
I agree.
And maybe you don't, but so much of Christianity is going, Jesus did it, let's sing songs about how Jesus did it. I think if Jesus were here, he'd say, why are you still talking about me?
Oh, that's why. That's why I picked that clip. And we're back to the first clip, right? The insignificance of a sacrifice in trade for your soul If it's just a morale boost, then yeah, why are you still talking about me? Why? It's not that significant. This like, I'm in the dirt with you. I'm in the mud. No. Somebody sacrificed their life for you is different. Somebody sacrificed their life for you and then rose from the dead. They own you. They got dibs on your life. So this I and God are one thing is a like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know what the term is. Again, I'm a regular guy. I'm not versed in like every other sort of denomination or Unitarian. I don't know what it's called, but I've heard of it before. And at the core of it, it's self-worship. It's self-worship. If Jesus was, again, he says, I limit my understanding, or I limit my, to what Jesus said in the Gospels. Well, he didn't say that. He said, I and the Father are one. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. He didn't say, you also. He didn't say that. So where are you getting that idea from? Did he not say the story with the lamps and the bridal party is supposed to be waiting for the groom to return and they're waiting with their lamps ready? How many people died just to get the Bible to you? How many inventions were made just to make it possible for you to read the Bible? And then why are you still talking about me? It's a crazy place to land. It's a crazy, crazy place to land when you've read the Bible and when you're like, I lean heavily or whatever his phrase was on the Gospels, and that's the understanding that he has. It's like that's nowhere. That's absolutely nowhere. That's some guy who wants to play down Jesus and play up man. He came up with that. Some guy came up with that because that's easier. There's another thing, and I didn't pull the clip of it because I don't remember where it was, where George is sharing that he didn't live with his, he wanted to have a time apart from his girlfriend or whatever, fiance, when they didn't want to live together prior to being married because that's what, and Pete is like bristled by it. He's like winces at hearing it. And this again is like it's a case study on people who are lost. They are allergic to the truth. They're allergic to the gospel. And he has an actual visible reaction to hearing people honoring and serving the Lord in like a level up way, a beyond surface level way. And that's, Paul says in Romans, they will, knowing the truth, they rejected it for a lie, something that tickled their ears. The truth doesn't tickle the ears. It hurts. And I don't remember what the clip is. I'm sure someone else could find it. But like winces at hearing that. And it's like, you do something bad and like he's going to be upset with you. Like, no, George explains it right. Being that he's so good to me, I want to do good back to him. Again, Jesus says this, if you love me, you obey me. It's Jesus. His words. It's in John somewhere. I don't remember where it's at. If you love me, you obey me. Do what I say. Do the things that please me. If you love me. This is not some kind of like slave master. We are his slave, but that's not the kind of master he is. That's the kind of masters we are. Like, you did bad. I'm going to punish you. Like, no. I did good, so do good back. That's it. And it's not like some crazy hard thing. Again, story very akin to my own. I went through the same thing. I chose to not live with my wife prior to us getting married. For that same reason. And we're abstinent for over a year prior to getting married because I wanted to make sure that we were entering this thing obedient. You know? And it's not like that spared us from other issues down the road, but it spared us from something, maybe. And even if it didn't, even if the obedience was just for the sake of obedience, that's good. That's fine. That's what the Lord wants. He doesn't want this exchange of services. So, I don't know, man. The interview was tough. And I didn't really watch a lot of clips of it. I watched the whole thing. But it's tough. It's tough because there are some there's some closely related items in my own life that I share with both Pete and George. And it's really sad to see someone who claims to have the upbringing that they have land pretty far off the mark. And it's no criticism of George. And he was not there to debate him, he was just there to listen. And he's, when someone is so bristled, so allergic to some of the things, your own choices and your own thoughts on things, you got to like really walk on eggshells to keep the conversation moving. And that was also an unfortunate part of several moments felt like very, like him cringing at the idea of someone having like that level of obedience. And I know that's probably not it, but that's just how it came across. It was a little tough to get through some of those parts as well. But again, my heart goes out to old Pete, aka number one Batman. But and then a slightly different kind of twist of things, and this is kind of very off topic, but I thought it was kind of cool. I was listening to old Rogies, Joe Rogies with was it Mike Metzer? What was that guy's name? Let me find it real quick. I don't want to. Kurt Metzger. They brought up this thing about gold, and I thought that was really cool. Where like Joe's like, oh, what's the significance of gold? When do we start using gold coins and gold this, that, and the other things? And they kind of it didn't go anywhere. But I thought it was kind of like an interesting idea. Like why is gold so valuable throughout history? And I mean, I know just from like watching science videos and stuff on YouTube by like one of my favorite channels is Numberphile. I don't know if they've ever gone over it, but like also, I don't know. I like sciencey stuff in my free time. I've seen every episode of Mythbusters, so I'm not playing around. I'm not playing around. Okay. Gold is like one of the best conductors. It is like a superconductor basically. It is like the most conductive, and it's also one of the most reflective materials, naturally occurring materials is available to man. So from like a utility point of view, super valuable in that. But that's like for sciencey stuff. That's for not caveman, unga bunga, using it, just a shiny material. Then like they had said that it's like you can spread it and coat things in them in gold very easily because it's a relatively soft metal and it can be spread very, very thin and still, it's so reflective that it can look like something is solid gold when it's actually just coated. So you get, it can make hard, steel or iron, copper items look, brilliant in gold but still have the strength of a stronger material. So, there's some utility in that. But if I want to take a kind of a funner approach, that's not a word, but a funner approach to looking at that, right? So I don't recommend doing this until you have a very, very firm grasp, and I'm not saying that I do, but I feel like I do, of the canonized Bible. But in the uncanonized books, particularly I don't know what it's called, the Book of Adam or the Apocalypse of Adam, there's an interesting little coinkydink in that book where after Adam is kicked out of the garden with Eve, they are brought to this cave. I can't remember what the cave is called, like the Cave of Comforting or something. I don't remember what it's called. And again, you take these books with a grain of salt. You just take them with a grain of salt. I'm sure 100% of the things in them are not false, but I'm also very certain that 100% of the things in them are not true either. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. Just for the thought experiment, again, I'm not a theologian. I'm not a biblical teacher. I'm just a guy. So I like thinking about things. And I also co-host a conspiracy theory podcast. So I like going through thought experiments and like just going there. Hypothetically speaking, if the items in this book were true, there is a story of Adam being brought to this cave, and he's very sad because, he's not in the garden anymore. And God brings him some items to kind of comfort him and let him know that, like, yes, my judgment is final. You are not getting back in. And you are not being restored back to your former, brilliance and free of corruption. However, I'm not out to get you. There's just distance now. So he brings him these gifts. It's kind of like a show of good faith, good standing. Like, I am who I am, and I got to do what I got to do. There's rules to this stuff. You are now not holy, so you can't be in my presence anymore. But I still love you. I still made you as close to me as in my likeness as anyone will ever be, right? So he brings him, I believe it was gold, frankincense, and myrrh, the same things that Jesus, aka the second Adam, as he's called, is brought when he's born. So gold being a symbol of your standing with God. If that is true, it would be interesting that carries forward, perhaps, as like some of the psychology of like, well, I have gold, so I am now in good standing, or, I am in the blessings of the God, whatever God these other individuals believed in. And then there's some level 2 spooky, it's pretty obvious and pretty evident that the pyramids were built during the time between the fall and the flood. When it's a few thousand years between the fall and the flood, and a lot of spooky, weird things were happening. Like things so significant that, as detailed as our records are through the oral tradition, like, and as accurately as things have been captured, that whole span of time was just nuked out of existence. It was so wild. Nobody knows what was happening there. There's only conjecture. The canonized Bible makes zero attempt at reconciling that period of time. Like, it was purposely blotted out. The uncanonized books can't even capture the amount of crazy things that were happening during that period of time. Just an absolute bananas wild, the Wild West of both realms. But it's pretty obvious that the pyramids, the erosion on them is from water, which lines up very well with there being a flood and it not being localized, because that's not where the ark came down, right? And so anyway, the understanding is that the pyramids were covered in, I think, limestone. I don't know, whatever's alabaster. I can't remember, but they were white. The bases were all white, and the very top was covered in gold. So, being that gold is extremely reflective and extremely conductive, the pyramids were more likely than not some sort of a tool. And there's a lot of ideas out there about the pyramids and what they are and what tool they may have been, but I bet you could bounce a light. I bet you the flat sides angle towards something. Just hypothetically speaking, right? If the sun was coming over, cresting some hill or some sunrise thing, and it hit, a beam hit one and it, reflected off of the others, I bet you something like that happens. I don't think that the idea of mirrors and reflectors triggering things and like Indiana Jones is just out of thin air. I bet you that is like planted in us somewhere, that like those things were tools to either triangulate something or to create some sort of a field of some sort or whatever. They were not tombs for mummies. They were, I think, maybe some sort of a tool. And they point to true north, and they are like some scale down of the circumference of the earth. The bases of all of them are some scale of the circumference of the earth. I don't know if it's like 2 scale, like that is the calculation. That's some factorial. But, and again, math, not my strong suit. But I know that like the bases have something to do with the circumference of the earth, and then they point somehow to true north, not magnetic north. Now, what's also interesting about that is, again, this goes to like the gold and the reflecting, and what would they be reflecting and that kind of thing. That also in the book of Adam, or the Apocalypse of Adam, there is mentions of the waters of the north that can like wash you of your sin. It's a very weird book. And again, may not be true. Probably not true. Maybe not. But you got to explain the pyramids somehow. Something happened. Something weird happened. Somebody wrote something down. So there's, in the book, Adam tries to go and find these waters to wash himself in. And there's some mishaps with the devil, who's, trying to guide him there and trying to kill him on the way. Again, just having fun here. Just having fun. You listen to a podcast with Rogan, you ought to be thinking fun. Just kind of going out there. And this is all I'm saying. Just going out there. We're just hanging out. We're just throwing some ideas out there. If the waters of the north were a thing, and you wanted to know where you're at, and
like your positioning at any given moment without knowing the stars or such and having a compass and all that sort of thing, creating a mathematical map of the earth using triangles and then having the caps be, and also the white is also super reflective, I'm sure. So having these giant reflectors that can like most likely bounce some sort of light up into the sky, you'd always know where you're at. And they somehow point to true north. So just throwing it out there, using the light off of these pyramids, perhaps you could, if you were trying to get to true north, where the waters of the north supposedly were, you would need some sort of a guide to point to true north, because a compass would take you to magnetic north. So true north they need to get to. So you need some other compass device. So it would be, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting thought that perhaps, gold, its relationship to, God and his gift to Adam, and they're standing with each other, and then using that to then find the waters to wash you of the sin, to cleanse you, whatever the magical powers of the, it's just an interesting thought experiment. I know that's crazy to go into straight off the heels of what we were talking about earlier. I get that, but this is just that kind of thing. This is that kind of hang. We're all over the place. And that's fine. We're all over the place. It's just a fun idea. I wanted to end it on a fun idea. I think that that's kind of cool. Again, I don't recommend reading those books. The Bible does reference the book of Jasher. Well, we'll get into like discussing some of the non-canonized books, I'm sure, at some point. But I've only read 2 of them. And it's nothing like, there's just some weird stuff in them. I don't think there's anything like too crazy in them that's like gonna change change your look at salvation or whatever. I don't think there's anything like that earth shattering in them. They're just coloring in huge periods of time that there's no detail on. So anyway, that was a cool thought. I wonder if there's anything to that, try to look at things like through a biblical lens, even if it's kind of more fun and kind of like out there a little bit, but if it's got some sort of a tie back to the Bible, I think that that's, pretty neat, But anyway, just to kind of recap things, it's really important to make sure that we're grounded in the whole Bible. Jesus didn't have a New Testament, and he only speaks one section of the New Testament. The Gospels they're four books, but they're all the same. They're all the same. Different perspectives, different stories, different details, but all the same. All of his references are Old Testament references. There is no New Testament. They're all Old Testament references. All of them. So to write off the Old Testament and only do New Testament, I think is foolish. I think it's foolish, and I think you'll end up reinterpreting things, because the basis for the New Testament is what Christ taught and pointed back to in the Old Testament. The Old Testament's kind of tough, and that's what that's what the story time with Uncle Charlie is. That whole channel is just reading Old Testament stories and kind of just getting a nice, just basic breakdown of them. Nothing crazy, just a nice basic understanding. So that way, we know how to navigate that and move on to the next thing in the new. But you just being off in a little thing can take you way off in down the road or when push comes to shove. And yeah. So anyway, thanks for hanging out. And yeah, I don't know what this is going to turn into. I'm excited. I'm excited. I think this is what the Lord's calling me to do. And I'm excited to be doing that now. I'm not trying to put on a show. I'm not, and that's something that I've struggled with, my own vanity in this thing. So I'm trying to get rid of the vanity, strip it down, and just do the thing. So I thank you for watching, and we'll hang out another time.